Max Bankman, I'm the new doctor.
Welcome aboard the Odyssey.
ABC Thursdays.
This ship is heaven. We're tending to our passengers' dreams. I'm in.
From 911 executive producer Ryan Murphy comes a splashy new drama on a luxury cruise ship with Joshua Jackson and Don Johnson.
It's your job to keep everyone alive.
She's in VFib. 1, 2, 3. Clear.
I have a pulse.
You're going to be okay.
Dr. Odyssey. Thursdays, 9/8 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
What are some signs that there is emotional abuse happening?
Number one, when you're always feeling like you're wrong, it's on you to make things better. And if your partner is telling you it's your fault, you got to do it better. A narcissist or an abuser who will apologize all the time and say it's never going to happen again, and then it does.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I'm your host, Joanne Crone, joined here by the lovely Bree Tucker.
Why, hello, everybody. How are you?
We have a great episode for you today. It is about emotional abuse. And this is such a hard topic to define because I feel like it's just started coming out in the zeitgeist, like this kind of abuse that can happen in terms of manipulation, in terms of making people feel like everything is their fault. And as we discussed in this interview, Brie, how like we as women were kind of led to believe this was normal in relationships based on some of the 80s movies we saw.
Yes, like you'll often hear me talk about like, so in my previous life, in my first marriage, it was definitely a difficult one. And I do know that like now my experience was emotional abuse during my marriage. And now I'm dealing, like I always felt like there was a reason for that and a lot of struggle, a lot of shame because I worked in social work. It was my job to help support people. And I helped numerous women leave an abusive relationship, get the supports they needed, but I didn't recognize that I needed them myself. And when you realize that something's off, but you don't quite know what is off, it makes you feel like you're crazy. And I think that's a big piece of emotional abuse. Like it doesn't have to necessarily be at the level that you're leaving. It could just be something that you're seeing even happen to you or to your kids. And you're like, this doesn't seem right, the reactions that they're having or the interactions they're having with this person. And that's what we get into.
Yes. In this episode, we really like dig into the differences and things you might notice and also things you might feel. So it's hopefully going to be very informative for you. I got a lot out of this interview. We were talking to Vickie Lynn. She is a freedom fighter and overcomer rising out of the ashes from 25 years of narcissistic abuse. She is founder, CEO, and head coach of the Survivor Center. And she coaches in high conflict co-parenting, and she's a divorce coach reaching back into the fire to help other single mamas sharing custody with an abuser. And Vickie is the proud single mom of a 14-year-old. And we hope you enjoy our conversation with Vickie.
You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast.
Vickie, I love your setup behind you with the mirror and the floral. Like,
Thanks.
where are you joining us from?
So I'm on the East Coast and I don't share location. I have a protective order against my ex. So
Okay.
yeah.
Let's get into that a little bit, the story behind that, because the work you do now, you are educating women about emotional abuse and how to protect kids from emotional abuse. And you have quite a story behind that. Can you share your personal story about how you got into this work?
Sure. So as is very common, once I realized that I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, in addition to other abuses that were going on, I didn't leave right away. In fact, then I got pregnant. So after having my daughter, she really was the catalyst that woke me up And probably before I was even feeling worthy of myself to have a healthy life, I knew she was worthy. And I wanted her to grow up being the person God created her to be. And I knew I had to leave. So there was a moment where she was 1 year old. She was in her high chair, and the ex had berated me verbally about something. Who knows what it was? Probably something dumb. And he left to go to work, and I started crying, and I was slumped in the corner. And I see my little girl lean over her high chair and look at me and just watch me. And I thought, I'm done. There's no way I'm going to continue this and have her grow up like that. But as many people know, once you leave any kind of abusive relationship with children, you have to share the children. And so then my story took a huge turn into, okay, now we're going to navigate co-parenting. And co-parenting in and of itself is like a perfect world. People just didn't get along, and now they have their kids' best interest at heart. And so let's make some compromising, agreements. But that's not the case when you're working with someone who's a narcissist and, an abuser, fill in the blank, whatever word you want to use there. And so the next, 4 years sharing custody with her dad was a nightmare. And my daughter suffered greatly, not from physical abuse, but from all the emotional and psychological and even spiritual abuse, where she became a people pleaser. She was chasing after bullies on the playground. She couldn't do things good enough. And so she had this perfectionism growing in her. Playing Legos with her was a nightmare because if one little Lego fell apart, like she fell apart. And so I say all that because when she was suffering, I realized I had to rip the muzzle off my mouth and figure out how to help her and do it in a way that wasn't going to be so disparaging her dad.
Yeah.
Because at that age, and most kids will go talk to their parent and tell them everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what started the whole thing. I mean, I could talk for like 3 hours about my story, but like that's what started the coaching business, came from my victories when I was co-parenting and when I saw changes in my daughter, and then, how things progressed from there. And now we just live an incredibly beautiful life despite the abuse.
Now, when I've seen friends go through these situations before, emotional abuse is a very hard thing to pinpoint because a lot of people will almost talk themselves out of being emotionally abused. Like they'll bring it on themselves and say, no, this is all my fault. I should have done it better. I should have done it this way. And even the ex will say, like, this is all your fault. Like, I can't
Right.
believe like you're doing this. So what are some signs that women should look out for that there is emotional abuse happening?
I think you hit it number one, which is you're always feeling like you're wrong, always feeling like it's on you to make things better. That's probably one of the number one things that you can know something's imbalanced in the relationship. And especially if your partner is telling you it's your fault, you're to blame, you got to do it better. I mean, Bree, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like we're sitting here, like I'm trying so hard because one of the things that you said a minute ago that really still resonates so strongly with me when I went through my divorce was, so in Arizona, you have to go through a parenting course. I imagine like most states are like that. There's some kind of a parenting course you have to go through when there are children involved in the divorce. And what I remember being hammered so hard was parent alienation. You can't say anything negative about the other parent because that could be grounds for parent alienation. Like you're turning the children against the other parent. And in my case, I didn't even know the terms emotional abuse or financial abuse. And those were things that was brought up to me by my lawyer when I was going through things. And I'm like, then I start reading about it and I'm like, oh my God, that is 100% where I was. Everything was always my fault. I always had to be the one to bend, apologize, 100% like environmentally engineering things so that he wouldn't blow up. He wouldn't get upset. He wouldn't lash out. The kids wouldn't suffer and have to have him be angry. But you don't recognize it when you're in it. You just don't.
So
Sorry.
you basically have a, no, not sorry. I'm
Yeah.
I'm adding on and asking some more questions of this situation. Just trying to define it for any listeners out there who are like, but you don't understand. It is my fault.
Yeah.
What it sounds like the missing part of that relationship is you don't have a partner who accepts accountability for their own actions. They put everything on you. Would that be right?
I mean, I'd say yes, but also you have the flavor of a narcissist or an abuser who will apologize all the time and say it's never going to happen again,
Yeah.
and then It does.
Right. There's that cycle, like they call it the honeymoon
Yeah.
phase, right?
Yeah.
Where when you finally get to the point where you bring up that these things don't feel right, they may apologize, or they might just say, "Okay, I won't do that anymore. I'll do better." And it
they'll appease
lasts
you and
for a
like
while.
make you think it's all good, and then it goes bad again.
Yeah. Yeah, any kind of like I call it like it's like a squeeze and release of your muscle. So the toxic cycle is you have that squeeze of the pain. Something is going wrong or bad, or you're feeling bad. There was a blow up, or he did something harmful. And then there's the release where either you just go to your corners and you kind of gather yourself back up. And then perhaps there's that release where they come back and it's all romance and flowers and everything's great until the
Yeah.
next incident.
Now, I have a question about that. So, and I'm wondering, Joanna, if you're thinking the same thing. Every relationship has its ups and downs. Every relationship has goods and bads. How do you determine when this whole squeeze and release type situation you're talking about is happening and it's not just your average conflict?
Well, that's a good question because I actually thought about this the other day that one of the things that we don't show our kids when we're in this type of relationship is healthy conflict resolution.
Yes.
Right? So I think you would know that something is off. First of all, if you have any ability to feel it in your gut, something's not right. He's pushing a boundary that maybe you don't even know it's a boundary, but like there's some kind of line and it's being pushed repeatedly and you're uncomfortable. But really, I think it's the fact that it happens again and again and again. Nothing's getting better no matter what you do. That would be my answer.
Can you give me an example of like a boundary that may be pushed? Something you've seen in like your clients or heard?
Gosh, I mean, I have so many examples. I'll use one during co-parenting.
Yes, please tell me.
We all know that there are people listening to this podcast episode going,
Yeah.
is this
Maybe?
Is this
Yeah,
what's
is this
happening?
I know. So, gosh, it's so huge to answer this question. I'm going to give you one from when I was dating him,
Okay.
and then one from when I was co-parenting. How about that?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
dating, I would tell him, this person's important to me, a friend. Okay. And then he would come alongside and pretend that person was important to him. And then I would say, okay, I'm going out with this person for dinner. And all of a sudden there was a problem. So it wasn't a boundary per se, but it was, here's something that's important to me. He knows it. He knows it's an important relationship. And now he's coming in to sabotage. So now he's like, well, where are you going? When are you coming home? And it would be so now it's a problem for me to have a relationship with this person. So already it's not necessarily a boundary, but a problem. Okay. It was something that's important.
So controlling your relationships with other people.
Yes.
Okay.
Is one of the big things.
I have to relate to this. Now that I'm out of it, I can be like, one thing I used to do, I would talk to my sister on the phone and she would often call me on her drive home from work or at the end of the night. And my ex would say like, I don't appreciate it when your sister calls in the evening. This should be our time together. And you really need to limit that. That's being disrespectful to our relationship. And I would go, oh my God, is it? It must be. Like, I had no idea. Like, he's right. Oh, that is disrespectful to our time together. Me speaking to my sister.
Yeah.
And that's red flag. Not normal, right?
Red
But they
flag,
convince you that they are right and that you're doing something wrong or disrespectful to them. So you're trying to appease.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing. And I want to hear about how you saw it in parenting, Vickie, right after this. My water bottle is my constant accessory. I carry my pink one with me everywhere I go, and I honestly get a bit anxious when I don't have it. And I am always looking for ways to make drinking more water easier so I don't even have to think about it.
And that is why we love AquaTrue. Seriously, just one set of filters from their classic purifier makes the equivalent of 4,500 bottles of water. That's less than 3 cents a bottle, and you know how much I love a good deal. Plus, we get to help save the environment.
The filters are affordable and long lasting. No changing filters every 2 to 3 months. AquaTrue filters last from 6 months to 2 years. I can truly taste the difference compared to my old water filter.
AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and makes a great gift. Today, our listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com and enter code NGM at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use the promo code NGM. Green Chef in every plate is now owned by HelloFresh, and with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's something for everyone. I love switching between the brands, and now our listeners can also enjoy everything at a discount with Joanne and me.
And I love takeout, but it is so expensive. And this is tasty restaurant style meals without that high price tag and less time even than it takes to get delivery.
I have to tell you, HelloFresh has a ton of options for whatever you are craving. Choose from a changing menu of over 50 recipes each week, plus take your pick from over 100 Market add-on items like dessert, breakfast, and did you know they have snacks?
That sounds amazing. Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free-NGM. Applied across 7 boxes and new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/free-NGM.
HelloFresh, America's favorite #1 meal kit.
I'm Margaret.
And I'm Amy.
And together we host the podcast, What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood.
Margaret, I would say you're sort of a where are my keys kind of mom.
Correct. Sometimes a where are my kids kind of mom. Well, you're, Amy, more of a we were supposed to leave 35 seconds ago, mom.
I mean, touche. In each episode of What Fresh Hell, we come at a topic from our usually completely opposite perspectives. I bring the research.
And I bring kind of the gimlet eye. Like, is that research really going to work, people?
And almost 10 million downloads later, we're still laughing.
We also talk to experts in the parenting field, plus parents with stories we can all learn from.
We make each other laugh, we challenge each other's assumptions, and we have what we think is the best parenting community on the internet.
Check out What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood, wherever you listen to podcasts.
So we're talking about signs to know if you are in a relationship with emotional abuse. And Vickie, you're about to share something that happened to you after you married your ex and in a parenting situation.
Yeah. So this really was when we were separated. And I had a boundary because most of us that are in a relationship with someone who is an abuser in some way or controlling, we have very weak boundaries, or we don't know how to have boundaries.
Right, because you've been told that they're bad boundaries, that they're bad to have.
100%. Yes. They hurt him, or they're disrespectful, or something. Yes. And so you're right. Exactly right. So when I was co-parenting with him, so I was separate, thinking like I had escaped with my daughter and like things were better and I was free, but really I was not free. The example is I'm bringing my daughter to him for a custody exchange for his time. And I had told him, we're done. And yet he continued to embrace me at exchanges, give me a hug, and my arms were by my side, and he's still putting his arms around me. Yeah, that sounds like, it should be easy just to tell him no. Well, not really. Not when you have this history of abuse and you don't want to have conflict in front of your child.
Exactly. And also like you're trying to teach your child about love and like you're handing them over to somebody. You don't want them to be afraid of him, that person you're handing them to.
Yes.
Puts you in a position.
Yes.
It is such a tricky scenario too, because at the same time you realize that the time your child spends with this person is not beneficial to your child. And having to navigate that is just, it feels impossible to me. Going in now to like having the kids involved and kids spending time and kids getting on the other side of emotional abuse. What are some things that people see in their kids to like give them a red flag the situation isn't going well for them?
I think one of the number one things or signs that they're being emotionally abused is they over apologize. So they apologize for breathing. They apologize for tripping, like things that are not reasons to apologize. That's a huge red flag that they're being emotionally abused. Seeking to get your approval. Now that's tricky because most kids want their parents' approval, right?
Yeah.
But it could be, you will notice, I guess the best thing I can say around this is as a mom, you have a gut, you have instincts, and you will know, oh, she's doing this and it's so fun and she's trying to get me to like it and blah, blah, blah. But then it's like over the top. And you get that feeling in your stomach, like something's off, something's not right. Now, especially if you know that he emotionally abused you, that he controlled you, that he disparaged you, that he, tried to basically dismantle your strength. And so you can kind of know that he probably is trying to do that to your child or children too.
That's so interesting. So over apologizing just for things that they shouldn't even apologize for, and like trying eagerly to please and get approval.
Yes.
And I know this is so different, but I'm also talking to all the people pleasers out there. Like, how is the behavior you're seeing in your kids different from that of a, general people pleasing behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think whenever kids are really trying to people please, there is some unmet emotional need. So you could be a great mom, but maybe there's something that your kids is not getting, whether it's from you or from the other parent, something. And so I would just say, ask them some questions, start having
Be curious.
conversations with them and hearing
Mhm.
from them rather than you just deciding, let me just, tell them this, teach them that. Ask questions. And it's the same goes for when you're dealing with kids that are being abused in any way, emotionally or otherwise, is asking lots of questions, because one of the things that they don't have is autonomy, and they don't have what's called
Mhm.
agency, which is control over their life. And most kids don't in general, but they have less than any normal, quote unquote, normal kid does.
So what I hear you saying is the symptoms are pretty much the same as general people pleasing, but the triggers for those symptoms are different, which is why you really have to get from your kids exactly what's going on.
Yes.
Because like as a child who was a people pleaser, I was a people pleaser, and I also see my son have these people pleasing behaviors. And the things you were describing is my son to a T, over apologizing, seeking for my approval. And I have had conversations with him. Anxiety runs in the family. And his is a result of him just saying, like, he's not doing things well enough. And he's like beating himself up. And it's nothing anybody says to him, he says. It comes like from within. And so I think it's an important distinguishing thing to make, because I know a
Yeah.
lot of our listeners out there struggle with the anxiety as well. So if you're listening to this right now, you have kids with anxiety, there is this very different thing. It's the cause of it, not so much the symptoms itself.
Yeah. And you know what else?
Yeah.
There's a couple of other things that I feel like I would observe in my kids, and by all means, Vickie, like pop in here on what your thoughts are. Like I would notice that my kids, when they came home, they were just much more quiet, reserved. They would watch to see what was going on before they would interact. They often didn't want to leave the home when they came back from their dads. They just wanted to come home and just stay home and not really go anywhere, not really do anything. And these were kids that used to be pretty social, outgoing, active kids. And another thing too I would see is that they just, their emotional stability, their resilience wasn't as strong as it was before. It was almost like, when you've had a really bad day, you've just had a really bad day. Things have been like going wrong all day long. By the end of the day, you're just emotionally exhausted. And that trigger for a meltdown is much easier to get to. I feel like I would see that a lot as well. Like these emotional outbursts that, and kids have emotional outbursts. We all know that. Like so do adults. We all have that. But it just seemed like it came much easier. It came much more often when they were first adjusting for like those first 48 to 72 hours of coming back, because we did week on and week off in our household.
Yeah, 100%. Because to your point, when kids are being emotionally abused and they're at their other parent's house, they have to keep it together.
Yeah.
And so when they come home to you and you're the safe place, not just physically, but emotionally safe, that's when the meltdown happens. So yes, that's absolutely a good sign not a good sign, but a sign that something's going on, because their nervous system has been in fight or flight the whole time they were with the emotional abusive parent. And so they come home and they have to let it out somehow.
Right.
And so often it is meltdowns, right? And what you just described also is like they're like zoned out. The way that a lot of us describe it is it takes us a couple of days to, quote, get our kids back, where they're back to their normal personalities.
Yeah.
So yes, that's another sign.
Right. And I feel like as parents, or especially as moms, do we not all collectively ask ourselves, when our kids have meltdowns with us and not with other people, what am I doing wrong? Oh, it
Always.
must be right.
Always.
Right? We always and there are times when it is that we're not holding firm boundaries and stuff like that. That is certainly a possibility. But I think when it happens a lot, and then you have other people asking you that, or especially the other the other parent. And I think this is true like in a relationship where you're still married, you're still actively with that partner, as well as the ones where you're divorced and you're not actively with them, where they're like, well, it must be you because they don't do this with me.
Oh, and that would be even like perpetuating it, right?
Yes.
Like,
So Vickie, I am curious. What do you recommend people do when they are faced with that comment from their co-parent?
and I want to hear about it, Vickie, right after this.
No one told us the truth about parenthood. Why? This is the podcast everyone needed before they had kids because now that those little ones are here, there is a lot to unpack. I'm Rachel Shepardota, and I am your host for the podcast No One Told Us, where we tell the truth about parenting and let you in on all the stuff you really should have known about before having kids. I am the founder of Hey Sleepy Baby, but this podcast is so much more than sleep. We'll be diving into all the topics that you really care about and need to know while you do your best job raising those adorable, tiny humans. Our goal is to just make you feel less alone and less overwhelmed. There are so many things that no one tells us before becoming a parent, and I think that we should really pull back the curtain on becoming a first-time or second-time mom or dad to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll have a little education, a little fun, and a whole lot of heart that goes into each and every episode. So join me and our amazing guests each week to hear us talk about what no one told us.
So, Vickie, you were just about to tell us, what do you do when your kids are having meltdowns at your house and then your ex is asking you, well, what did you do wrong? It must be you. What's going on?
Well, the name of your podcast is so perfect for this question because the guilt that we all as moms feel, we all know that guilt for whatever the issue is, situation. Now you're adding on guilt that you don't have to live with this emotional abuse any longer, but your kids have to, and you're not there to buffer or shield them.
Right.
So the guilt's going to go from like level 10 guilt to level 1,000 because of that. So
somehow it's still your fault, even though you're not with the person anymore.
Right. And everything's great at his house. And what's wrong with you? Because they're having problems with you, but when they go to him, they're angels. Like that's the message you're going to get, right?
This is something I've heard from so many friends who have this going on. It's like you're in the home. Like yes.
And there's nothing that you can say to a person who is being abusive that's going to make any sense, make any difference, or placate them. So really, you kind of have to bypass and not necessarily answer that question directly.
Okay.
What I think the best advice is to, first of all, you have to check yourself because the guilt you feel could overtake you. And then if someone else is coming in saying it's your fault, et cetera, it could be just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I always start off by advising, that a mom really works on renewing her mind in the fact that she's giving her kids a safe home, emotionally safe home for whatever time they're with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's got to start there. And then from there, you can start to, okay, what things can we do to mitigate the meltdowns? What things can we do to help and teach them coping mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
So I answered your question, but I went around it because really there's no direct answer. It's you've got to start with alleviating that extra guilt you feel and focusing on knowing you're giving them an emotionally safe home. That's the place to start.
Basically, you have to start with you to make sure that you are the strong harbor that they could come into after they're in this taxing situation. And you touched a little bit on teaching kids resiliency and these emotional coping skills. What are other ways like moms can empower their kids to really survive against this emotional abuse?
So much of what I teach in my courses and coaching has to do with this particular question. And what I realized is, I didn't go from being a doormat and a people pleaser and in an emotionally abusive relationship to all of a sudden standing up to him. It didn't.
Right.
Like I had to incrementally get there. And so do our kids. So the answer isn't teach your kids to stand up to their dad and use their voice. That might be the ultimate goal. That's not the initial goal.
Yeah.
So, right, Bree, do you agree?
Oh yeah, I'm laughing because like in my scenario, like I've been divorced for 7 years now, and 7 years of therapy for my kids over the course, in and out, right? 5 different therapists, and every single one has had the same goal: teach the kids to talk to their dad, teach the kids to be able to talk to their dad, and it's exhausting. seeing that and never really making progress. Like one of them is starting to make progress with a new therapist that they're with, and it's fantastic. I love it. I'm so proud. My heart is bursting. But it's also, I just want to be like, damn it, guys, this has been 7 years. What do we have to do to make that progress? And it feels like to other people, like they'll ask the same question, right? Why can't they? I don't understand why they can't. It must be a problem with, then all of a sudden it starts to turn into like, it must be a problem with them. And it's not.
So what's the first goal then, if it's not to talk to the parent?
So to me, the first goal that I started with my daughter and I teach other moms to do is boost their self-esteem, their confidence outside of dad.
Like
so for example, one of the things that emotional abuse teaches you, unfortunately, is that your voice doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that goal of standing up to the dad, if the dad's the abuser, right? Standing up to him is like the ultimate. It's not the start, because if you stood up to him, you're going to get, a barrage of verbal diarrhea. And so are the kids. So they're going to be like, well, why bother?
Right.
So for me, I started to teach my daughter that her voice mattered. That meant things in our house. So giving her options. What are we having for dinner? Which sounds so like not important, but it is, because then I'd listen to her opinion and then we would do it. And this is like you build. So her opinion started to matter in our home. Okay. Now her voice is mattering. Then I started to go to like Starbucks and have her go to the barista and ask for a napkin, ask for a straw, where she would have clung to my side because she was so anxious. And so then I just started to, because I knew that the barista is going to be like, oh, she's so cute. Here's your straw. So it's silly. Then her brain's making the connection. My voice matters. Here's the result. It's positive.
Yeah.
Yes. That's excellent. Because at first I was like, when you build kids' self-esteem that they matter outside their parents, you think your first thought goes, okay, hobbies. What skills do they have? What are they into right now? And how could they build that? But you don't hear about the insidious nature of things where if they're in a skill that then dad starts to tear down and tell them that they're not good at the skill. And here's a kid wanting to please their father, that they automatically get out of those things that gives them value and gives them strength. And it's so difficult. So I love those easy examples of just having them go to like a barista and make them little moments that you can control outside of their time with dad.
So boost their self-confidence. What's another thing that parents can do to help empower their kids?
So I also started working with my daughter to identify, I'll say bullies, but really it was emotional abuse in the movies we were watching, in the TV shows we were watching.
Really?
Books that we were reading. And honestly, this just came out of necessity. You know what I mean? You're a mom and you're doing all the things and you're at your wit's end. And I always say it kind of was like, just came out of the sky, like you just try things and it worked. So we were watching, Disney movie. We're watching, let's use Rapunzel. It's just like the ultimate example, but emotionally abusive parent. Yeah. An emotionally abusive mom. And to the extreme, but we would watch the movie and then I'd ask her questions as we were playing afterwards. So not grill her, but playing, what do you think about Rapunzel? What do you think she felt? And what do you think about the mom? And we would just have conversations. And it helped her get in touch with what did she think? Not what was mom telling her, right? What did she think? And then I would affirm what she thought and felt. And then that just started to build her. It's like her BS meter.
I love it.
Yeah. Her ability
Which needs built in everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. The ability to see that there's BS, there's red flags, but we're not using those terms. And it just grew from there. It just kept going to where, a couple of years later, we moved to a new neighborhood and this girl was befriending her. And after the first day or two, she came to me and she goes, I don't like what she's saying. It's a red flag. Now, at that point, we had talked about red flags, but
you're like, oh, be still my heart. I'm so proud of this.
Right.
The language is amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these are skills for life. So you go into the workplace, you're going to need these skills. So these are skills for life. And so the whole point is you teach them outside of their dad first, get them solid. And they are so smart. They will start to realize and come to you and say, oh, I think dad lied to me the other day. Or do you think dad's lying? Or, they're going to come to you with these revelations because you've built them up in the other places.
So they're like starting to realize themselves exactly what's going on and how that situation is playing out in terms of what they're doing. That's
Right. They may not
interesting.
know the full thing, but they start to get
Yeah.
clues. Yes.
Yeah, they start to get clues. What would you say if to people listening out there and they're not in an emotional abuse situation, but they're pretty sure that their friend may be in an emotional abusive relationship? How can friends help other women to support them in this situation?
Well, what I'll say is one of the biggest things for me that woke me up every time this happened was a friend who I used to lament to and tell her the problems and right over and over. She just looked at me one time and said, I really can't help you anymore. There's nothing I haven't said already.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that sounds like she wasn't being supportive, it actually was a big, huge aha for me because that meant this shouldn't keep going. There should be a resolution. There should be a fix. And everything I've done at this point hasn't fixed it. So I might need to look somewhere else. That'd be one thing.
Gosh.
Bree, what would you say?
She didn't come right out and say, I think that you're in an abusive relationship.
Right.
Because you probably would have been like, no, he doesn't.
Right.
I'm not getting hit. No, I'm fine. I would know what that is. And it's sometimes like it's a bit of an embarrassment, I think. Like I know that in my case, I had several friends that would tell me, Bree, your relationship is not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody should not do that. They should not treat you like that. Like sometimes there would be phone calls that would come in and I'm out on a play date with a friend of mine and the phone call would come in and my ex-husband would be like, I'm home. Where are you and the kids? And I'm like, oh, well, we're at the park. We're at a park with Jen right now. And he'd be like, well, you need to come home because we should be having dinner in like half an hour. And I'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I would hang up the phone. I'm like, we got to go.
Yeah.
Why? Oh, because my husband came home early. I didn't know he was going to. And now I have to go make dinner because it's going to be late if it's not there. She's like, that's not normal. And you would think that in that case, like that's where you kind of get embarrassed. You kind of withdraw because you're like, oh, well, I know that they don't think it's normal, but this is my normal.
Yeah.
Mm.
And there's a point where finally, when everybody keeps telling you normal isn't normal, that you're like, oh, crap. I think I got lost in that logic already now. I'm all like, whoa, where did I go?
But it's like normal isn't normal because I mean, you go into relationships with this idea of what love is and how like it should be romantic and wonderful and those things exist.
You've heard
And
me
they
say this. The 80s ruined us. And so did John Hughes.
That's where I'm pulling this information from, Brie. I'll cite my source, Bree Tucker.
John Hughes kept teaching us that we could change the bad boy. It don't happen.
Yeah, you don't change them. Oh my gosh, I had so many like thoughts about like changing guys and be like, oh, a bad guy. Oh, but like if he really loves you, he could change.
Yeah.
And that's the message that you got from 90s movies or 80s movies, most of all.
Either way.
So
Either way.
Yeah, it's a hard line in emotional abuse because even the things we saw in popular media, it was mostly emotional abuse that we were meant to normalize into our relationships.
Yes.
So there's no wonder that women are stuck in these things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
For sure. So what is something that you're looking forward to, Vickie? What's something exciting going on in your life?
So, I mean, personally, I literally wake up every day and thank God that I'm free still every day. Don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. And I hope I never lose that gratitude. But professionally, we have begun a membership for women who are co-parenting with someone who's abusive. And so I'm excited about that. It is a community of other women that support each other. And I'm able to coach in there a couple times a month. People can ask their questions. And it's just a really great place because for women to receive support, because this can feel very lonely and like you're on an island and you're out on a play date with other moms. Bree, tell me if you relate. And you're going through hell trying to help your kids, build them up in this abuse. And the mom's talking about redoing your kitchen and you want to throat punch her because meanwhile, your kid is like having major 10 meltdowns every time they come home.
Yeah.
So this community I'm excited about because it gives moms a place who are dealing with this to go with other moms who understand.
Excellent. That sounds much needed.
It's finding your community, finding a place where like people can understand and can relate. And that can be hard.
Well, thank you so much, Vickie. You've given us such insight into emotional abuse and especially how we can protect our kids from it. And we thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Wow. I really have had a lot of mic drop moments following Vickie's Instagram. And I just have to say, one thing that she said in that episode that was a huge light bulb to me was she talked about how you can make your place a safe harbor. And I think that was what I had to hear, because I kept thinking that it was my job to protect my kids. And it is my job. It is still my job to help protect my children and help lead them into a life where they have knowledge and skills and they can be happy and healthy. But you had to let go of the fact that you can only control what you can control. And that was like, and I know you've heard me talk about that. Like, that was a big thing. There's so much guilt involved when you leave a relationship that is unhealthy, because you're happy for you. Like, I remember the first, I'm sorry, I'm on like a soapbox here.
No, please. I mean, this is your experience. So
I know, right? Like, this episode is like a bit of a therapy thing for me. Like, I remember when we finally decided to get divorced, which was after my third request for a divorce. But when we finally decided to get divorced, that night I go and I'm taking a shower, getting ready for bed, trying to process it all, because it happened like so quickly. It was like literally a conversation of, I think we're having like some serious problems here. We should either go to therapy or we need to consider getting a divorce. And my ex was like, I'll take a divorce. And I'm like, wow, that was the third time we had a conversation over the course of our 10-year marriage, 16 years together, where I had asked to leave. And it was the first time he didn't fight me on it. And I'm in the shower and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is really going to happen. And my first thought, Joanne, was, I can finally cut my hair. How messed up is that? Because like he would like get so angry at me if I even got a trim, because it was constantly like, your hair needs to look a certain way. I need you to look a certain way. I need you to be a certain way. And I think that's when it finally got to me that it was messed up and this was going to be good, but it was also going to be super scary. And it was the worst time of my life, trying to leave somebody that was used to controlling every aspect of my life. That person did not like going through a divorce with me, because suddenly I found a voice, and then I was trying to teach our kids to have a voice, and that was not well received.
No one's allowed to have a voice but this person.
Yeah. And I had so many people that tried to tell me for so many years that it wasn't healthy. And I kept telling them that, well, there's good times, like and I didn't want to like bad talk my spouse. And I think a lot of us feel like that. Like, we don't want to bad talk our spouse, but when you're having multiple people look at you with that raised eyebrow, or when they're talking about their experiences with their partner and you cannot relate because you're just like, yeah, my partner would never say nice things like that to me. My partner would never offer to help. Those are definitely those red flags. And there are things that we can do to help support our kids in whatever capacity. If yours isn't a co-parenting capacity, which we talked about a lot in this episode, but you're just seeing these kinds of things happening, because there's so many relationships where this can happen. You can have emotional abuse at work, right? You can have emotional abuse within your family with extended family members. I mean, we've seen this happen so many times in our balance group, where people are talking about things and we're like, okay, this goes beyond your typical conflicts.
Yeah. This comes to abuse. This isn't just a misunderstanding. This person is not acting appropriately.
Right.
It's a really hard line, especially for women, to admit is there, because we so want to make everyone happy. And that's how we've been socialized. If someone's unhappy, like, bend over backwards to make sure they're happy, and make sure you're nice, and make sure you're pleasant and everything. And so if you're listening and are having a hard time figuring out like what is appropriate behavior towards you, how you should be treated versus how you are treated, know that it's just so complicated. It really, really is. And we hope that this episode has shed a light on some things, and maybe you saw some similarities in your own life to it. But the most important thing is to take care of you, because remember, the best mom is a happy mom. Take care of you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for stopping by.
Are you a parent in need of a laugh and a little escape? Look no further. Parenting is a Joke is the podcast you've been waiting for. Hey, I'm Ophira Eisenberg. I'm a stand-up comic and parent. And each week I chat with one of my top comedian pals who, just like you, are juggling careers, busy lives and schedules, and raising a family. You can expect candid stories, hilarious mishaps that happen on stage and at home, and just a lot of laughs. There's no expert advice here. Well, actually, sometimes a good idea does sneak its way in, but mostly just pure, relatable fun to remind you that we're all in this parenting adventure together. New episodes of Parenting is a Joke drop every Tuesday, so tune in, get ready to laugh, unwind, and maybe even feel a little bit better about your own parenting. Because sometimes that's exactly what your therapist, pediatrician, and bartender ordered. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform.